It has been really fascinating to study and learn about metabolic health uh, after having studied the nervous system in depth and how it works, and to see the parallels between the processes and how they influence each other and are so intimately connected. Today, I want to share a little bit about a paradigm in understanding that is supportive of both of them, but in particular to bring the attention to the metabolic process. And that is that in healing our metabolic health, we really need to focus first often on nourishment before we focus on releasing or detoxifying the things that are mm, holding up our health or creating chronic symptoms. This is not always the case. If someone is super nourished already and strong and resilient, they can go straight to some kind of intense process to clear out, clean out, whether that looks like doing some fasting, whether that looks like actually evoking some purgative or detox responses in the body with castor oil, etc. But one of the issues, and I think this is where it's also really sad that there's still such a misunderstanding and such a shame around body weight and weight in particular, uh, in the sense that there's a kind of misunderstanding about the suffering that's often going on beneath that, which actually has to do with malnourishment, believe it or not. And so we tend to hyper focus on weight and whether we're unhappy with our weight, whether we're underweight or overweight, and and to miss the point that usually what's happening when we're not an ideal healthy weight, which is the one which happens when we're healthy and feels really good, um, is actually a nourishment issue, more so than a fat issue. And one of the distinguishing things, for example, is that there are two kinds of fat. You can have brown fat and you can have white fat. And the brown fat is actually really healthy. It's what, without that beautiful brown fat, it would be really, really hard for a woman to go through a pregnancy without a lot of deprivation and discomfort. It would it also is kind of like our healthy resilience buffer in our body. Whereas white fat actually is holding toxins. It's kind of like storing the stuff that is too much for us, that is overwhelming our system, that's not good for it. And it is keeping us alive and keeping us from being overwhelmed by grabbing that stuff and storing it in white fat cells. And I know this because even though I've been thin my whole life, I had a lot of white fat, and it was very confusing to me because I was having the issues of needing to get rid of toxic white fat while I was extremely underweight and not able to keep on weight, especially during the height of my illness when I was losing weight really, really fast, and it was very scary. Um, I could actually feel my bones like when I sat down, and in a way that was extremely like frightening, and my doctor was scared and put me on steroids to try to stop the process, which it kind of did. So it was like an emergency thing, but then I had to heal from the steroids because I'm very sensitive. Uh, and I say that with no judgment, but actually, I have a lot of pride now in that sensitivity and understanding how it has led me to be able to learn what I've learned and grow through some really, really intense trauma, including medical trauma. So, white fat versus brown fat is important to know and to kind of get underneath the hood of obsessing so much about being overweight or underweight and thinking about nourishment. Before I could safely start to address the white fat, I had to actually build some brown fat. I had to nourish my body so it felt safe enough to start to let go of those things. And so this was both a nervous system process and a nutrition process. And when I say nutrition, in part I mean diet, like the food I was eating, but I also mean attention to the deficient micronutrients and especially minerals. And so, why this is an important conversation is because we live in a world today where the soils are, I can't remember the exact number, is it like 70% depletion rate? It's more than 50. The amount of loss of the natural balance amount of minerals that are meant to come into our body when we eat our food is literally not available, even if we're eating an impeccable diet. And it can be very confusing when we're only focusing on making sure we're eating the right foods, or even not doing that because that just feels too overwhelming to even think about, when there's actually an underlying deficiency that's kind of actually a trend in the wider perspective. That's not anybody's fault. It's certainly not your fault if you're overweight or underweight or struggling with toxic white fat in any way, shape, or form, which also could be something that is measured by having blood sugar issues, even blood pressure issues, different issues with cholesterol, which is a whole topic that I could talk about another time, but is actually not a bad thing. But it can be a bad thing if it is chronically high, not because cholesterol is bad, but because it indicates it's trying to solve a problem for you. And that problem is something that maybe needs to be addressed. So, for the sake of keeping it brief for my weekly video, I will leave it at that, except just to leave you with this frame, which you can approach also your way of working with yourself from a nervous system perspective. And you can even bring this to directly to your sense of nourishment and how you nourish yourself and your body with food, but you can also bring it to how you nourish your body and yourself in terms of the sensory, like with body oils or with smells, or emotionally, like how you take in information or stimulus through media or television or books, or just in your everyday life. Thinking about everything as a form of nutrition, and be discerning about what is actually nourishing you. When you start to focus your attention on what's actually nourishing you, what's giving you a sense of satiety and feeling satisfied and taken care of in any of these areas of life, it will create a sense of safety in your nervous system that will help your cells move out of the cell danger response, help you move out of fight or flight, and allow you to then actually have an easier time metabolizing the nutrients that you are taking in, so that what you are taking in that's good for you actually lands and actually starts to help to build healthy brown fat and a healthy kind of nourishment in your body, which will eventually then lead to you being able to release and detoxify the toxic white fat if you need help with that. Um, yeah, so feel free to reach out to me for a consult if you want any support in this particular area as well. And I'll see you next week.